I think it's exciting, man. I think we're entering a whole new chapter as an industry to show, look, we've been saying we're here for a reason, and now we're kind of at the stage where there's a lot of projects that are proving out.
Welcome to Beyond the Beat, a podcast by Chain Story, the agency to elevate your status in crypto. I'm your host, Pedro, and every week I'll be talking to the people in crypto media. We'll be telling their stories, their failures, their lessons, and whatever tips or tricks they've got up their sleeves.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Beat. Super excited to talk to someone that I've been following for a while. Big fan of his media, although as far as I know, it's a community-owned media outlet, so we'll dig into that. Zack Guzman from Coinage, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on with you.
I've been changing it up a little bit, the intros, and I'm keen to get your perspective on what's been front of mind for you lately when you've been, whether just looking at the crypto space in general, like bull run is here, even though it hasn't gone everywhere yet, but yeah, or where you think like the state of media is. I'll let you free flow wherever you want to take it. You can even take it into the football realm like we were talking before. But yeah, what's been front of mind for Zack lately?
Oh man, okay. Well, I mean, front of mind for me lately has just been kind of completely hitting the reset button on crypto in the US. I mean, it's kind of been simmering there for a while now with the ETFs getting approved in the US, what that was going to do to not just price, but also kind of the acceptance of crypto no longer as a huge scam or fraud industry in the wake of the FTX collapse. Kind of people hitting also on an individual level the reset button themselves on, what crypto really is. And now that you have Trump coming in as a media organization that's kind of pushed the forefront of that narrative as a community-owned media outlet, even heading into the election, everything was politicized and everything was kind of getting a second look. And I wrote an op-ed in CoinDesk about media in this era of Web3 and, what we're doing at Coinage to kind of challenge the idea of, can you really trust mainstream media? And if everyone agrees that mainstream media is dying, what's the real solution to the problem? And I think, what we've been building at Coinage has been fun to kind of show, if you really lean into what Web3 is all about, in terms of read, write, own, as a community-owned outlet that is now positioning to pay dividends to our NFT holders, the first project to do that in the US. I think it's exciting, man. I think we're entering a whole new chapter as an industry to show, look, we've been saying we're here for a reason, and now we're kind of at the stage where there's a lot of projects that are proving out, not just ours, obviously, proving out that this technology can be used for good and is going to be used for good. And it's exciting, man, to be stepping into that now.
Do you think that, how important do you think Trump and potentially pro-crypto administration is going to be into that path?
Yeah, I think, everyone right now is trying to figure out what's actually going to happen, and what Trump, when he says things, what he actually means by some of those things, and even some of the early selections, right, for his appointees, whether or not any of those will really get confirmed by the Senate. So there's a lot of unknowns, but I do think in general, it's a reset in terms of what we saw from the prior administration, and Kamala Harris is already kind of running on that reset. I'm not sure how many people believed that she would follow through on that reset, but at the very least, when you have two commissioners coming out as strong as they were at the SEC, including crypto mom Hester Peirce, saying that the agency is doing a bad job under Gary Gensler, to not have him be there anymore is truly a reset. And so I don't think every rule is going to get thrown out. I don't think that's going to happen. There's still certain things that even under a Trump presidency, if you look at World Liberty Financial, the crypto project he launched, even he was launching, a KYC'd, institutional investor only, not tradable token project. So that doesn't really look like, hey, we're really leaning into what even the hardest, DeFi people want it to be. He was basically following the most cookie cutter, safe approach. So, I don't know what that signals in terms of what he really thinks DeFi or Web3 under, a new administration could be. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be as radical overnight as some people are saying, but certainly they're going to be more open than the last administration. I think that's refreshing.
And then how important do you think like the US is in the whole crypto industry? Because like we're always talking about decentralization, that this is something for the masses. This is like, and we're constantly peddling this idea that yeah, this is for, I mean, the narrative of banking the unbanked has been thrown around for a while, and like financial services for emerging markets and that sort of stuff. But then nowadays everything is ETFs, everything is Trump, everything is, I don't know, like I see people talking about Howard Lutnick, people who I thought were like low key cypherpunks, or people who like talked a lot about like Bitcoin privacy, and now they're all about Howard Lutnick and how he's going to be brilliant and this and that. And so yeah, I'm confused about where we are, but then I'm also confused about like how important the US has become or is and will continue to be for like an industry that doesn't necessarily need to be so reliant on the US, I feel.
Hmm. No, it's definitely true. I mean, that kind of elephant in the room slash borderline hypocritical positioning has been present in crypto for the better part of, I want to say, ever since that huge debate with Sam Bankman-Fried and Eric Voorhees kind of went viral in terms of like, hey, do we really want to lean into being a revolution, or do we want to kind of soft agree that maybe some permissions are fine and partner with the traditional financial markets? When BlackRock owns as much Bitcoin for its clients as it does, is that a good thing or not? And so there's a lot of grappling that this industry has right now in regards to, do we really want to stay true to our cyberpunk cypherpunk roots, or do we want to kind of pump our bags? And that's a trade off. And we covered this with Eric Voorhees in our first, in our first season. Uh, you know, Highlighted as true today as it was then in 22. Like, does this industry really want to be full on permissionless money like Bitcoin tried to pioneer? And there are some inevitabilities with that, right? To your question on do you need the U.S. As far as the most advanced financial market in the world is concerned, it certainly doesn't hurt to have the
Yeah.
big whales buying up Bitcoin right now, and potentially, actually establishing a strategic reserve under the U.S. I think it's one of the most interesting questions in terms of, politically. You had Trump go from saying that Bitcoin is a scam and he only loves the dollar, to maybe potentially now being the sitting president of pushing through a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And that's a 180 for him, but also a 180 for a lot of people in the way that they look at Bitcoin, in that it could potentially be not a threat against the dollar, but an ally. And, I think it's too early to say which way things are going to go, but I really do think that if the U.S. even dips a toe, right now the consensus is that it will trigger all these other follow-on countries to also dip a toe, and then the cat's out of the bag. And almost everybody's looking at this as we're already so far past that, because BlackRock
Yeah.
essentially runs the show in traditional markets, and if they're already on board, then everything else is going to fall. And so, I think we're there. And I guess the answer to your question is the U.S. is already on board, so it's happening.
It's all green light from here. It's all up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I no, I agree. It's definitely not bad for the industry. There's a side of me that's like undecided. There's a side of me that, like you say, who knows how fast these changes are going to come? Who knows to what degree? We're like in the early stages of euphoric price pumps and price rallies, where all the you only read bullish thoughts, and like these countries are front running, or they're starting to think about their own Bitcoin strategic reserves, and to start to think about how they're going to beat the US when the US will start stacking or anything like that. But I wanna dive into sort of the media space. You guys at Coinage have flipped the switch on traditional media, especially in crypto, which is something fascinating. And I'd love if you could tell us the story of how Coinage came to be and why you thought this was something that needed to happen.
Yeah, so my background is in traditional media. I worked at CNBC and at Yahoo covering crypto basically since like 2017. Um, and, Elon Musk and everybody else has been talking about this trust problem in media, and it's not a surprise. I mean, traditional media has its challenges, and as a journalist at traditional media outlets, I saw them firsthand. And what's really scary is that nobody trusts the media anymore. And I say it's scary as a journalist who never really pushed an agenda, to be clear. I just wrote stories. I've never experienced, the big bad
Are you
stories
the
of the
one
media
and
is
an
biased.
Are you the one and only unbiased journalist that?
I don't think I have any biases, but my whole point is that like it's inevitable to have biases. Everyone has these things ingrained in them, whether they know it or not. And so I don't think it's impossible for anyone to be unbiased, but I think good journalists present sides and present facts as they are. The problem is that you can never defend that. There's no like thing to point to and say like I'm not lying to you. And the allegation of bias, as we saw, becomes pretty damning to truth, right? If you have Elon saying, "Yo, that's not true, it's biased," people start to believe it, and then trust goes down, and it's not a good cycle. And I think as a society, that's problematic. Um, you get bad outcomes when people don't trust fact anymore. And so, how do you fight that is the main question. I think everyone agrees it's a problem, but no one knows the solution. And so, what we are is an experiment. Coinage launched, I quit to start it as an experiment to see what could happen if you had an outlet that could be community owned, influenced by its readers, truly kind of like permissionless in terms of anyone can join and say, hey, I like this project, I want to influence it, and I want to own a piece of it. And so when we were looking at options, the safest route normally is to just launch, and there are regulated kind of SEC approved securities launches. You can launch a company and do things that way. But what caught my eye in Web3, and this was after Constitution DAO launched, and kind of they had this mission of bringing together owners on the internet to buy a replica constitution. And that was crazy. They raised like $40 million, and everyone's like, "Whoa! I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could do that either." And we looked at it and we're like, "What's the legal way to do this?" And we worked with lawyers and leaned into a co-op model. So Coinage is actually a registered cooperative DAO that lets people buy NFTs and become co-owners in an outlet. And by doing so, co-ops are legally regulated in the US, and they allow you to pay patronage dividends to active members. And, I think a lot of people in the industry have been trying to grapple with, hey, are airdrops to people who don't do anything good? Is that bad in terms of being backed by VCs and not creating true value for the people who are your biggest supporters? And so to me, it's just a natural model. And so that's kind of where Coinage came from was, hey, let's create something that can be more trusted, that can, deliver value back to our most engaged members. And it's all been very organic. I think the big thing and most exciting thing for me and for our members right now is that it's working in that it's opening doors that like I before as a journalist sitting in a newsroom in a closed office, like anyone can become a Coinage co-owner. And when you do that, we have members all around the world who are randomly like joining our project and opening doors and introducing us to people that I never would have thought possible. And I can get into that, but it's truly pretty crazy to see Web3 working and having people join our project and help us in ways that like I couldn't do alone.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and I feel it's a true use case for Web3 for crypto in something that's like desperately needing like a big revamp in the way that media outlets are run. Why do you think this doesn't exist more broadly? Because cooperatives have existed for ages, and the idea of worker run and the idea of like and then you have like traditional finance that pays out dividends to shareholders and things like that. Why do you think that mesh hasn't happened when it comes to media outlets? Do you think it's a journalist thing? Do you think it's a media outlet company thing? Do you think it's like a lack of wanting to hand over control to the media outlet, or the fear, for example, of what that would entail?
I think so. Yeah, I think, I mean, you can even look at OpenAI, right? And it's like sometimes it's really tricky to find backers or funding or get something off the ground that like can be both, I guess, profit seeking but also true to its mission, right? Like things get warped along the way sometimes. And, it's not easy, certainly, to run a media company that can stay functioning. I think also media has problems in terms of monetizing. And so for us at Coinage, we're somewhat unique. As I mentioned, we had a member who I knew, um, and he was getting out of the crypto content game. He's like, look, I don't want to do this anymore, but you should work with this validator team that I've been working with. And, in Web3, after you start with the idea of, hey, we should really act like, if we want to be a Web3 media outlet, maybe we should act true to those Web3 principles, right? So you establish that from the
Ideally.
get go. You start from that from the get go, and you say, okay, we're going to be community owned, we're going to be a co-op, cool, great. But then you still have the same problem that any other community or any other company or any other project would have, which is, how do we make money? How do we stay sustainable? And so, working in this space opens weird monetization possibilities. And I say that because the whole thesis that we have in Web3, or at least that I see it as, is that content and money are merging online in this era of the internet, right? So you have attention and you have money online. And there are different ways to monetize attention and money. And so Coinage actually partnered with this Austrian company to run our own validators. So it's a different way to monetize, right? And I think what's cool as a journalist is that I looked at it as a new way to monetize trust, right? So, like, if you think about journalism and the idea of the New York Times or any other entity that's, basically what you're saying is, I'm putting words on paper that you should believe are true. And you can pay me for that information, and that's one way to monetize, right? You can become a subscriber. Or you can start to like leverage what the brand of the New York Times is. You can start to leverage trust online. And I think historically journalism has done a bad job of doing that. But, when you mix content with money online, then you can start to monetize in different ways. So we now run these validators, and people are staking across 40 different chains. We have a little over $300 million staked with us now. It's a totally different way to monetize trust that like isn't probably something that could work in like food or sports maybe, but it's certainly something that works in Web3 content. And so it's like an interesting thing we're playing with. But I guess to the question of, how do we kind of set this up, and why do we land on it, and how will it work? I think, if we lean into those things and we say, okay, if we're trying to monetize trust in that way and we're community owned, I don't know. I don't have an answer in terms of like what it looks like in the end, but I do think that living true to those values at the very least is driving this project forward and has already resulted in some very interesting outcomes when you do give up control. It's scary for sure, but I think if we are believers in Web3, it's like the only real path to move forward.
Is so do the readers, or the, I guess, readers slash owners, do they get a say also in, for example, guests that come on, the topics that are getting discussed? Are they participants in the editorial process as well? Like how does that work with not just paying dividends, but when it comes to the content creation side of things as well?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I think this is the coolest thing that we've done. Obviously, these things don't happen overnight, but in year one, what we did was we launched something called Crypto Project of the Year, which we're actually bringing back now, which is the ability to kind of crown the top projects in crypto. A lot of times, those might be shady backroom deals or an editorial newsroom, and they might have their own biases, whatever. But with this, we're not getting paid to like add these projects to this list, right? It's just like, hey, anyone in our community, what is the top project you think from this year? Like, who's doing the best stuff? You tell us, you nominate it, people throw it in our Discord, and we talk to those projects and say, hey, our community members like what you're doing. We want to have you on. We should talk about it. That's like a good example of like kind of how the Coinage experiment goes, is we listen to our members and we highlight projects and stories on the show as they want to see happen. Um, you know, it's not 100% like, okay, we have to say what these members want us to say. We still have the editorial kind of call. Like me, that's my job, to have the editorial call of like, even if our members are like, hey, this thing's great, I can still look at it and say, maybe it's not, or here's the things that like you should know. But for this celebration, like Crypto Project of the Year, we had last year, a bunch of people vote in it, and all the founders came on. So Anatoly from Solana, John Wu from Avalanche, all these different projects came on, and they voted on the eventual winner of the best project in crypto. And we're doing it again. And I think it's just like a really fun way to kind of, again, people are going to want to pump their bags. People are going to have biases, but if you kind of check them against each other,
Mm.
you might probably end up with objectable or objective fact, I should say, um, if you're canceling all those things out. So I think it's, probably a more trusted way to kind of report on the space and give everyone a chance to kind of have their opinions heard.
What do you what do you make of like the general crypto media space? I mean, you can name names, you can point fingers, you can say this is terrible, this is this is a free for all. But yeah, what do you like? Do you have any big gripes? Do you think that there's anything that we're doing extremely well? Like when you look at, because there's like from what I'm grasping, you've got like Coinage at the front end of what's possible with Web3 media and this idea of like reshaping trust in a community owned way. And then in the back, you've got every other media outlet that's doing stuff in like a very more or in a more traditional way. So I'm sure you have opinions or ideas about the people that are sort of slower to adopt Web3 into their structure and architecture.
Yeah, I mean, I think, historically, crypto media has been more pay for play, and it is still kind of surprising to see people approach us and be like, "Hey, how much does it cost to get on Coinage?" And it's like we don't nothing because we don't do that. And so it's a little scary to like see that be kind of the status quo that people assume. Um, but then again, I've never really like this is my first time founding something, so I used to just be a journalist, never really saw like the business side of things. But I think that that's kind of really fun too when you open it up in terms of, hey, like I said, the way to monetize with the validators was not on my bingo card for 2024. It was just something that kind of happened because a member said, hey, maybe we should do this. And there are things that pop up all the time like that, including, advertisers that I never knew and people saying, hey, you should partner with this company or this project. But I will say it's an interesting kind of way to definitely have kind of a firewall between editorial coverage and kind of running things. Um, but also, I think that's my job too, to say, look, the people who should be benefiting from this is not me. It should be Coinage, the brand. And I think still to this day, a lot of people don't either trust that because it sounds too good to be true. Like I have the luxury of
Mm.
the fact that, we didn't start with an NFT drop, right? Like we raised money ahead of time to kind of get this off the ground and incubate it and see and make sure that everything's set up properly. And now flip the switch and start to monetize. Um, and it's a different business if you're starting from let's just monetize from the jump and not set ourselves up that way to kind of have checks and balances or protect against that. And so, I don't want to point fingers and want to say like we're the only way to do this right, but I do think being more transparent is generally better than being less so. And I'll give you an example because there are projects that I think are cool, right? Again, people might see that and say, you're just shilling this thing, right? And
Big
I
shill
think that
alert here.
yeah, and that's totally fine for people to react that way because, again, that's been the status quo. If you're hearing, like, hey, this project's good, general instinct might be, okay, you have a huge bag and you're just pumping it. But, like, for example, I saw Do Queen. It's like a meme coin that is, like, trying to look like it's AI generated about Do Kwon and, like, appealing to the old Terra community. I think it's a very interesting project because it's in the theme of, like, AI meme coins. Um, but I also, like, I'm not paid to say that. And I think a cooler way to do it would be like Coinage the brand as a DAO. Potentially, if you want to partner with that, with us and you want to airdrop tokens to Coinage, I think it's very interesting because, we have followers who like Luna. They might want to hear about this. I'm not saying like, hey, you've got to pay us for us to talk about it. But I think as a DAO, we can actually own those meme coins. And at that point, it becomes part of the experiment with like, okay, yes, Coinage is a bag, but like I don't. And I think a lot of times you have like KOLs, like influencers who, privately are saying, pay me and then I'll talk about your thing and probably don't even disclose that. Whereas what's the alternative is maybe you're more transparent. Everyone can see those tokens go into the Coinage DAO. You disclose, yeah, Coinage has those now and we want to talk about it. So I don't know. Again, I'm not saying one way is better or worse, but one is certainly more transparent. And I think potentially there's something to be done there too. Um, but it's all kind of learn as you go.
Where do you stand on like this shrinking attention span and the crisis of like concentration when it comes to readers and like the audience itself? Because this is something that I think about often because I'm a written journalist, so I write for a living, and like people have flimsy and very frail attention spans to read like a full article and things like that, and that's why I see like a bunch of things pop up, either whether that's podcasts or whether that's stuff like snippets on social media, shorts, all that sort of stuff. How are you like watching the shift of how content is starting to, or how the audience is starting to interact with information in a completely different way?
Yeah, I think, Coinage itself also had to evolve a little bit because when we started out, we were kind of doing more of a TV show. It was built for TV. They were like 30-minute episodes in our first season, and just kind of like the appetite for a crypto TV show certainly dried up after the FTX collapse, shall we say. So we had to kind of pivot and be like, look, that's not how crypto gets its news anyways. Crypto is, like you said, it's a short attention span. They want to read news stories. They might want to read snippets. So like that probably isn't even the right way to launch out of the gate. Maybe we'll get there 5 years down the road as this industry grows. Maybe there will be kind of a need for like an Axios or like a Vice on HBO for crypto. I hope. Certainly Coinage is well positioned for that since we've leaned into video as being kind of our main focus. But we did kind of pivot out of that into season two, basically now becoming somewhat of a story aggregator site. So if you go to coinage.media, you can see like top headlines from, CoinDesk, Block, kind of all over, plus our own original reporting as well. And I just think there's a need for that. And it's on brand for what Coinage wants to be, which is kind of like your smartest friend in crypto. I think one of the main learnings for me was that this industry can move quick and you can get distracted. But I don't honestly think that's the best way to follow things in crypto. It's like let things happen and bubble up. And like if enough people in your sphere are telling you about it, that's probably signal. That's how I've always found like the best projects, I think, or like I hear it from a friend, I hear it from another friend. My smartest friends tell me that this thing's interesting and I should take a look at it. And we tend to trust our friends more than other people. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do is, hey, could Coinage become kind of that smart crypto friend that you might not have or a community of smart people? So we really focus on quality over quantity. And I think this as an industry is actually kind of that too, because there's not a lot of power players in crypto. But if you focus on the right eyeballs, that can become quite valuable. If you can be like the arbiter of truth in crypto, certainly that becomes very valuable. And so coming from CNBC, I saw that in traditional media for financial media, you might not need to have a bunch of eyeballs, but if you have the right eyeballs, you can make a lot of money. You can be very powerful in the space. And so for Coinage, that's kind of what we're trying to do. We've always focused on quality over quantity. And I think, in this space, just as was true in TradFi, it's pretty important. And one anecdote on that too is, Sam Bankman-Fried, everyone always talks about kind of the bad things about FTX, but him buying the rights to FTX Arena in Miami was kind of a result of there is no good way to market in crypto. You can't really run like Facebook ads. And even if you do, no one clicks them and no one believes them. So like there is a need for like partnering with crypto media or influencers. Like the reason why it exists is because there's no real other way to spend your marketing budget. And so again, I think it's a real bet on Web3 in terms of, creating a community that's powerful. Like they should be rewarded. And that's what Coinage is all about, is like join the community, read our content, watch our stuff. We grow, you grow, everybody wins. And I think if we're the winners in the space, that seems better than maybe some VC-backed media company or some KOL who's dumping on you in the end anyways. So I don't know. Maybe that's the best finger pointing I can do on this spot.
That wasn't a finger point as much as just like I'm just going to toss it out there like that. See where it lands.
Yeah.
I want to pick your brain on why you became a journalist, because you've said about like the word trust has come out quite a few times. But yeah, I'd love to find out why that was the career path that you chose and why CNBC was one of the first places and Yahoo was one of the first places you went down.
Yeah, I guess, coming out of college, I graduated with a degree in economics and financial news. Like I always liked trading stocks as a kid. Other people watch different stuff. I watched Jim Cramer in high school and middle school.
That chain's move is in its infancy.
So, I liked financial news because it was like not political. It was like we were increasingly entering a political time, and for financial news and trading, it's like facts are facts, and like you can hate them. Same thing with Bitcoin. Like people hated Bitcoin, but like you can't fight facts, and oftentimes you can't fight the market. And so it was fun to work in that space. Eventually, I wanted to do a crypto show actually, and at CNBC at the time, that was not well received. They didn't really want to do a crypto show. And
How
so
come?
I was like,
Were they just skeptical, or they're just like, we don't have a budget for this, or we just find this
I
scamming
think for
not
whatever
interesting?
for whatever reasons, it wasn't on the top of their radar. I mean, if you think back and look at the crypto coverage from CNBC in 2018, and Crypto Man ran from Africa. I don't even actually know how that happened, um, but even the U.S. CNBC team was, I think, caught flat-footed. And I was looking at the data, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of interest from a younger clientele in crypto. Um, but I think, so much of it was that like, hey, crypto's a scam. We don't want to like lean into that. It's not a real thing. And like after the collapse post 2018, crypto kind of died. Like not a lot of people were talking about it. So I left and went to Yahoo, but eventually it came back, and I never really like I said, once Constitution DAO popped up, once NFTs popped up, it became clear to me that like crypto had evolved from just being a financial play, or like kind of being a like buy this token go up, it's an investment. It crossed over into culture, and it crossed over into ownership, and it crossed over into like community building online in a way that you couldn't have never done before. And so, for me, it was kind of a full circle moment because I don't love talking about financial media, but I do love like reporting on things and covering it. And also like, I spoke at graduation, and I used to work on a sketch comedy news show in college. Like content creation is fun. Um, and the idea of creating community owned content is even more fun, I think, once I saw like what's possible with NFTs and Web3. And so that's kind of where the idea of trustless media came from, was like, I was a creator who had an idea for a crypto show that got shot down, even though I knew it was something that should be built. I didn't have the money to do it alone, and I couldn't get it off the ground. But what could you do if you create something online where a creator who might have a fan base can tap into that energy and say, hey, look, let's do this thing together, and give them ownership if they're willing to kind of help fund it with you. So that's where the idea of trustless media came from, was a mix of Kickstarter and Patreon meets Web3 on chain. Um, and so we did it with Coinage. We got that project launched. We launched a second show called Best Dish Ever in the Food Space, which is basically the same construct as Coinage, but we worked with Food Network TV stars to get that off the ground. Same concept, buy an NFT, co-own it with them. And I really do think that like this is the way to build content online in the era of Web3. Like tokenize it, let someone like help you get it off the ground, and let a creator own something with their fans. Not every creator is going to do that, because I think there's a lot of ways for them to continue like just, shilling products and making money that way. But for the creators who really do think that like their audience, their followers, their community that they've built could bring value to something, I think it's going to be an exciting way for new creators that maybe you would have never heard of to become superstars, much faster than going the old route, which is, hey, you need to like know someone in Hollywood, or you need to know someone who works at a studio. Like I got lucky. I went to a good school and knew people who worked at CNBC, and like that's how I got my foot in the door. But like there's a lot of really smart creators out there who don't have that opportunity. And I think Web3 is all about breaking down those barriers. They did it in finance. That's what Bitcoin was. There's no reason why you can't do that in other industries. And that was the big light bulb moment for me, is that like this technology is going to spill over from finance into everything. And we're kind of seeing that now. So I hope Coinage works. I hope it's like a proof of concept to show that we could do this in every other media niche. And we've done it in two, and hoping to do it in many more.
Why do you think? Because this is something that I think about a lot as a content creator. Like the reticent, like there's a lot of people that are reticent to like tapping into Web3, tapping into crypto, its possibilities, and like I talk to a lot of people that aren't in either Bitcoin or crypto or anything like that, that are always like, I'm just not undecided, and they're not making any money from YouTube, from Spotify, from anything like this. And I'm sure that they have some sort of fan base that would want to tap into them. But then you've got like that chicken and egg thing where you also need a fan base or an audience that's also interested in crypto for them to buy your NFT, for example. And so it's like this sort of negative loop where it's like, okay, my audience who might not be into it, like I'm a musician, for example, but yeah, how do I like in the end it sort of turns into like they need to also convince or figure out a way to get their audience into crypto for them to then tap into the power of crypto. And to be able to sort of complete that circle, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that was one of the learnings that we had with Bestish Ever is that we launched with Privy in abstracting away all the crypto pieces, right? Because if you're a food fan or you love this food creator, you're not going to want to you're not going to spin up a wallet and you're not going to buy crypto to
Yeah,
buy the
fuck
thing.
that.
So like, when you're outside of crypto, you certainly need to change your game plan a little bit. And so we did. And so you could buy it with a credit card and not even know it's crypto. To your point, all we're really doing is creating on-chain co-ops. And if people don't know they're even on-chain, they might know what a co-op is. And so I think it's kind of like a needed step for the industry to realize, hey, maybe we shouldn't put crypto front and center on everything, but it can certainly live on the back end. And I think that that's necessary. There are certain things that are necessary, right? Like you still need ownership over something. You still need to be able to buy and sell and trade something there. And that's kind of like why we set up Coinage the way we did and why we set up Bestish Ever the same way is that, give people the option, right? Some people just want to support. Same thing with Substack. It's like, hey, I like this creator. I don't really want anything in return, so I'm just going to subscribe, and that's great. And it helps grow the thing, and everything works. But there are super fans, right? Like the 1,000 fan theory is like you could have a subset of people who like just want to support and get the content, and that's all they want to do. But then you have super fans who might want to put up more money and like really contribute to something. And admittedly, this is a risk, and this is a point that we don't have full data on because there's a behavioral economics like idea that once you mix charitable behavior with like monetary upside behavior, you actually create negative effects. Like people no longer feel good about what they're doing, and it actually decreases the like want to support. So again, I don't think it's going to be for everybody, but what we're trying to do is kind of like mix the idea of people who might want to understand, like they understand ownership, right? They might not be buying this thing because they want it to like 10x. They're not like your day traders who are going to step in. They could be, by the way, if you want to bet on Coinage and you just want to like trade it, by all means, the NFTs are there and you don't need to actually go through the ownership process. But what these are is like it lets people who do want to go through the ownership process buy something, support the project, money goes to the project, and then from there they can also like use that NFT to go through. We have to KYC people, but they go through the process and they become a full blown member and can be active in the project to earn a dividend. And so it's just like meeting people where they want to be. And I think that, to your point, a creator is not going to be able to do all that on their own. They're certainly not going to spin up a contract. They're not going to spin up an NFT. And it takes time for these things to be successful. And if you can just dump a meme coin and make a lot of money that way, I don't know if like this is the best path for every creator. But it again is for the creators who kind of want to build something. And so it's been fun for me to have those conversations with new creators now. And the one plus side that YouTube and Spotify and all these platforms still do have is distribution. And the co-founder of Netflix is one of our backers. He was one of the first people to mint one of our passes. And I think, Netflix itself didn't get there overnight. It took a lot of time for them to build up their own distribution. But, we've got one of the fastest growing crypto media news outlets now with Coinage. We've got a food series that's doing pretty well with Bestish Ever. Like, you can't build a Netflix the same way that you would have built it when Netflix launched, right? And I think we saw that is like a lot of streaming platforms spent a lot of money to kind of build this whole like top-down approach, right? But like, it's not too hard to squint and maybe see a path where we can build a bottom-up approach, betting on creators in different niches to create kind of a platform where all of these shows live. And that's kind of what Patreon did. So we're looking at that as kind of the right strategy.
No, that's so interesting, especially because I feel like there's an unlimited amount of creators that are coming on or like starting to flourish and starting to become. And it's interesting, the idea of like abstracting away the crypto side of things to make it easier for them and for their audience. And then, because there's this feeling in crypto that everything needs to be crypto and you need to be like knowing that you're using crypto. And there's that sort of like idealistic thing at the end of the day, there's a bunch of stuff like Polymarket is a great example. Like the things that are happening on the back end are crypto, and then you have front end that aren't at all, and it works really great, and you get this really interesting product and project that a bunch of millions of people use. And it just, yeah, it's made me think a little bit more about how crypto needs to be. And I feel
Yeah.
like slowly but surely it's like ebbing away that sort of idea that crypto needs to be central, and that like very sort of OG way of doing things is how it should be done. And like to be able to expand, we're going to have to, yeah, do away with a lot of that weirdness and that stuff that isn't very friendly to your eyes or to like how you operate on a computer. And that's just the reality of things.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? And it's scary for an industry to realize that, I think. And it's scary for people who are talking to people who are deep in the industry to maybe have to come up with a way to communicate it to people who aren't. But it's not surprising. No one ever wants to go through a checkout flow and be like, hey, like you get to pay for the thing that you actually landed on the site to pay for. And then it's like, hey, also, by the way, let me teach you how credit cards work. It's like,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. So, it's an inevitability, I think, and we're going to see more projects lean into that. There's always trade-offs. The idea of like not your keys, not your coins. Even Michael Saylor's gotten pushback for some of the things he's said. And like if you're dealing with kind of a solution like Privy or others that are kind of trying to like put it on the back end, what are some of the risks that come with that? How to like do you give up some of that interoperability piece, right? Where it's like before, if you own your wallet, you can very much know, if I take this NFT and move it over here. Whereas with like people who don't even know they have a wallet, can they even unlock benefits in the same way that they could have if they were able to, use their wallet when they own their own keys? So I don't know. It's kind of it's a TBD for sure. But I do think the fact is, and it sounds like we both agree that like there are more efficient ways here, and you got to make those trade-offs as a company or as a project because that's just kind of the way that it goes. But luckily, we've seen it work well. Bestish ever. Once we added that, we had like 20,000 memberships created to watch content in season one, which was a lot more than Coinage. And I think Coinage also will look to kind of implement that too, so we can bring people into the fold that might not. I mean, it would be a little weird to think that like you'd be wanting to watch Web3 content and not know how a wallet works, but it could be possible. And so yeah, I think each project has to make those calls wherever they're at. But I think it's true that more people, if you want to reach the masses, you got to make it easy.
Are you happy with the state of crypto as it is? Like meme coins are flourishing everywhere. Like TradFi is taking over. There's a bunch of tribalism and infighting. I guess that's been around for years, so that's nothing new necessarily. But yeah, what do you think of like the general state of our industry?
Yeah, I think every time you've seen hypocrisy or people maybe acting against like what they've said publicly, those are always red flags, right? Um, and like living true to Web3 ideals, if people are saying like, hey, things should be permissionless, and then they are running a company that's like extremely permissioned, you might say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And I think those were red flags before FTX went down. And I think a lot of people started to say like, wait a minute, should we take a look at what's really going on here? Um, Certainly like politicians, as they get into the fold, as they start writing some of these rules, I think that's something that everyone should be paying attention to. And I think if you're a crypto media outlet that is backed by some of the same people who are writing the rules, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I mean, certainly we saw some of that even play out at the Washington Post when Jeff Bezos said, hey, we're not going to do any presidential endorsements anymore. And a lot of people canceled their subscription to the Washington Post. So, like, I don't know how much might be covered by some other outlets if there are problems. And I think, if anything, we started Coinage to at least have an avenue for some stories that might not get told elsewhere to be told. Um, and also, I think we started Coinage as a Web3 project to at least live those ideals and say, hey, where are the real ownership projects? Not just like, hey, mint an NFT and like get reward points. Well, we also like VCs and our backers are the only ones making money. But like, no, like legitimately the people who minted our thing to get us off the ground, like those people have helped contribute to make Coinage what it is today. Like those are the people who should be seeing benefits here. And so, we want to do that legally in a way that doesn't get anyone thrown in jail or sued.
Ideally.
And
Yeah.
so, we want to be careful about it, but that's the goal. That is the goal. And so to your question on what do I feel about the state of crypto right now? I think we need more projects like Constitution DAO in 21 and 22 that got people excited. I think we need more projects that are living and, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and aren't just trying to say, hey, Web3 is read, write, own, but not actually doing it. And so, I'm excited to see more things like that. And I have no hard feelings, and I don't think meme coins are bad for this space. I think what is bad for this space is people not being transparent about, what they're promoting. And I think transparency is also one of those pillars of Web3. So leaning into it's often better than not. And we try and be as transparent as we can around here, around Coinage. And yeah, hopefully that gets supported by the industry.
I'm sure it will. It's going to be a good litmus test, I feel, as these kind of ideas expand, and the possibility of creating new companies in this way is I feel like companies that don't embrace it, you're going to immediately be able to push back against them and be like, well, this is crypto in its essence. Why aren't you thinking about these things? Why aren't you experimenting with it? Why aren't you adding these NFTs to the way that you're doing stuff, or I don't know, on-chain reserves, or proof of reserves and all this sort of stuff. I feel like slowly but surely these sort of things are going to start to expand. And thankfully we do work in an industry, well, for good and bad, that's very Twitter based, and everything is out in the open, that you can get pushback from things, and companies and big executives do have to reverse stance, or do have to do changes, or do have to do things, because the community backlash is so heavy that it's I can't get away with this. Whereas in TradFi or in other industries, you definitely can.
Yeah, no, it's true. We built ourselves in that way too. I don't want to be the leader of something if the community thinks I'm doing a bad job, right? And there are checks and balances like that in normal companies too. If you have shareholders, there are votes that could happen. And same thing for Coinage. It's we're a community owned outlet and community owned project, and so there are structures in place in terms of hey, get this guy out of there. I think it is helpful, and I think we've seen examples in Web3 certainly where pride cometh before the fall. If someone was there to check either Sam or Doe and certain things and decision making that happened before them, that's good. That's good for them. And that should be avoided the next time. And I don't know, maybe keep an eye on MicroStrategy as maybe another lesson to be learned. I don't know. But I think that it's an important piece because psychologically, I don't think anyone's ever prepared for being that right. I don't think anyone's ever prepared for a project going from 0 to 40 billion in a couple years, and the power that comes with that. And so saving yourself from yourself is never a bad thing. It's a great problem to have, by the way, if Coinage blows up in a way that hey, we're huge now. And I've saved myself from myself. Yeah, that'd be great. But I think it is weird in that crypto, it's an easy problem to have. And we've seen a lot of people fall victim to it, is that if you don't have those checks in place, you can make some bad decisions. And so I do believe that sometimes that's actually helpful, not just to the project, but to the people running them.
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, this has been a brilliant conversation. I always end these episodes on the same two questions because I'm always intrigued by what my guests are reading. And so I'd like to ask, what are you reading at the moment, book-wise? And then the second question is, what do you recommend, or what have you been recommending to people? This can be non-crypto related, this can be crypto related. There's been poetry books, all that sort of stuff. And it can be a book that you've always recommended to people, or something that lately you dug into, and you know those books that you just think to yourself, everybody needs to read this, and you're just peddling it to everybody. So yeah, what's on your reading list at the moment?
Yeah, so the one book that I always peddle to everybody and I love, and not just because, Mark is one of Coinage's backers, is the co-founder of Netflix, but he wrote the book about founding Netflix. And everyone knows Reed Hastings and everyone knows like his story as kind of still being the CEO now. But fewer people know what Mark did in kind of being the first CEO of Netflix and getting it off the ground. And his book, That Will Never Work, he came on my show when I was at Yahoo and he told me about it and I read it then before I launched what we're building at Trustless and Coinage. And it's just a really phenomenal look at like getting something off the ground and like the lessons he learned in starting something. And I will say now, certainly Trustless Media is not Netflix right now, but being a first time founder and going through the process of building something, like it is true that you never know how hard it's going to be. And just kind of like having the right system in place and following Mark's advice in that book that like, look, a lot of people are going to tell you that this thing will never work. Um, and that a lot of times you'll probably even tell yourself that that shit's not going to work. But like to have the belief and just like step by step want to see and experiment with like, hey, this might not work, but let's at least see what happens if we try that. Maybe there's a knock on effect that like we learn something over there and like just experimenting, and certainly in an industry like crypto that like nobody knows what the hell they're doing because it hasn't existed yet, like it's brand new. And so it's exciting to be building in a space like that. But I love his book just because it kind of like it's good grounding for like anyone who's thinking about being an entrepreneur, who's thinking about making the leap, and all the lessons that he learned along the way building Netflix. So That Will Never Work by Mark is a great book. And then in terms of what I'm reading now beyond that is, I was just down in Buenos Aires. So like a lot of my time is just trying to learn Spanish right now.
Right.
So I'm reading Spanish. I'm reading Spanish books. But I mentioned that because I actually do think, to your point on like the US, like right now, I would say it's the time to learn Spanish because crypto around the world is blowing up in a way that like the use case and the opportunities, I think, in terms of building products that help solve problems, like Latin America is a huge opportunity. So like I could give other books, but I would just say that like if you want to learn Spanish right now, at least that's where my focus is. It's just reading books to help me improve my Spanish because it's rusty, man. But but that's kind of what I'm spending my time on now.
No, that's a brilliant advice. Not only because I'm Chilean and I am Latin America, but because like it's all happening down here, or there's a bunch of things happening down here. And like I was listening to Arthur Hayes the other day, who was saying the same thing, and he's like, 4% of the population live in the U.S., but then so you have like 95% of the world that's either in Asia or in Latin America or just all around the world, these massive audiences, these massive markets, and yet everything is either for the US or just tailored for English. And yeah, there's just such an untapped opportunity. So yeah, good stuff. Commend you for learning the Spanish. And then maybe next episode we will be able to do this episode in Spanish and we're able to appeal to the local community.
Yeah, it's a good test. It's a good reason for me to stay the course because it's easy to forget some of the stuff. But hopefully next time I come on, we can definitely make it at least halfway through.
I mean, now you've got millions of listeners who are going to start harassing you. All the subscribers who are listening in now, they're going to start harassing you and they're going to put you to your word. So yeah, you've got
tag me and comment in Spanish. Comment in Spanish on this.
Ya escucharon, así que a comentarle en español.
Sí.
All right, Zach. This has been brilliant, man. Thanks heaps for coming on. If people want to find you, where do they go?
Yeah, so I would just go to coinage.media. Everything's there. That's basically where you can find all the information. You can join the community as well. Mint to become a co-owner or just read kind of what we're doing. And as we launch Crypto Project of the Year, Take Two, we'll see who wins and who's crowned the best project in crypto. But you can also vote on that too. Would love to hear kind of all your listeners, all their input too on it. But yeah, Coinage.media.
Great stuff. And yeah, for everybody listening, thanks for tuning in. Remember to hit that subscribe button and see you next week. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.